The sound of dripping water echoed in the dark basement. Ethan slowly opened his eyes. His head pounding, his vision blurry. The air was cold, heavy, and filled with the smell of rust and damp concrete. For a long moment, he could not move. He could not remember where he was or how he got there. Then he realized something worse. His hands were tied. Cold metal biting into his wrists, a single flickering light bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly as if someone had just left the room. The weak light revealed the outline of a cracked wall, broken pipes, and a steel door with no handle. There was no window, no clock, no sound of the outside world. Just the dripping, the chains, and his own heartbeat. "Hey, you're awake," a voice whispered from the darkness. Ethan froze, turning his head across the room. A young woman sat against the wall, her hands chained just like his. Her hair was messy, her face pale and tired. But her eyes were sharp, alert. "My name is Ray," she said softly. "You've been out for a while." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He coughed. The sound echoing in the silence. Where are we?" he asked, his voice shaking. Ray looked down, avoiding his eyes. "I don't know exactly," she said. "But I've been here for days, maybe weeks. I lost count." She lifted her wrist, showing him the chain. "They only come when they need something." "They?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ray nodded slowly. "The people upstairs." "Or the one in the mask." Ethan's pulse quickened. He pulled against his chains, testing them, the metal rattling loudly. "Stop," Ray hissed. "They can hear us." Ethan froze again. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, from behind the steel door, came the faint sound of footsteps. Steady, slow, getting closer, then stopping. A crackling sound filled the room. A speaker in the ceiling came to life. A distorted male voice spoke. Calm and cold. "Good morning, subjects," it said. "You both have a part to play today." Ethan stared at the ceiling, his breath shaking. Ray closed her eyes, as if she'd heard that voice many times before. The voice continued. "One of you doesn't belong here." Then silence. Ethan looked at Ray, confused. "What does that mean?" She shook her head. "It means he's playing with us." Minutes passed. The silence returning, Ethan began to search the floor, dragging his fingers along the rough concrete. Something small and sharp touched his hand. He picked it up, a rusted nail, half broken but still strong enough to use. His mind raced. Maybe he could use it to pick the lock. Ray watched him closely, her expression unreadable. "You're thinking of escaping?" she said quietly. "Of course I am," Ethan whispered back. "Aren't you?" Ray gave a small, bitter laugh. "I tried that once." "It didn't go well." She leaned forward, her eyes catching the weak light. "There's another way out," she whispered. "Not through the door." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Ray pointed toward the corner of the room where the floor looked uneven. "There's a hatch under those boards. I saw someone use it once." Ethan looked. But the boards were old, heavy, and nailed down tight. "It's impossible," he said. "Not if we work together," Ray replied. Her voice trembling but firm. He hesitated, looking at the nail in his hand, then at her. Trust her or go solo. Every instinct told him not to trust anyone here, but if she was telling the truth, maybe it was their only chance. Ray crawled closer, the chains scraping the floor. Her eyes seemed desperate, yet strangely focused. "If we lift those boards, we can reach the tunnel before they come back," she said. Ethan looked again at the heavy steel door. No sound came from behind it now, but the silence felt dangerous. Like someone was watching, waiting. Ethan's hand shook as he held the nail. He could try to pick his lock, free himself first, then look for a way out alone. He didn't need her, or maybe he did. A faint creaking noise echoed from above, the sound of someone walking on the floorboards overhead. Ethan froze, his heart thudding in his chest. Ray whispered quickly, "Decide now, they'll be here any second." He looked at her again. Sweat dripping down his neck. Was she lying or trying to help him? Her eyes seemed honest, but fear can make anyone lie. The sound above grew louder, now footsteps right above the door. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ethan took a deep breath. In that moment, everything slowed. The dripping stopped. The light flickered once. Then the doorknob rattled. Someone was unlocking the door from the other side. Ethan's hand tightened around the nail. Ray whispered one last time, "Trust me." "Please, Choice A, help Ray lift the floorboards and escape through the hatch. Choice B, ignore her, pick your own lock and hide before the door opens." The door handle turned, the metal creaked. The light flickered again. Then the door began to open, slow and heavy, and a shadow stepped inside. The door opened slowly, its hinges screaming in the silence. A tall figure stepped inside, wearing a black coat and a mask that covered his face completely. Only his eyes were visible, cold, sharp, and full of control. In his hand was a small tablet glowing with blue light. He walked toward Ray first. Not saying a word, Ray lowered her head, pretending to be weak. Her chains rattling slightly. Ethan stayed still, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The masked man stopped in front of Ray, then turned his head toward Ethan. "So," the man said in a calm voice. "The sleeper wakes." His voice sounded familiar, but distant, like something from a dream. Ethan didn't answer. The man looked back at Ray. "You know the rules," he said. "No talking between subjects." He raised a small remote in his hand. Pressing a button, a high-pitched sound filled the room. And Ray screamed in pain, electricity shooting through her chains. Ethan shouted, "Stop." But the man ignored him. After a few seconds, the noise stopped, and Ray collapsed, breathing hard. The man leaned close to Ethan, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "Every choice has a consequence," he said. "Remember that." Then he turned and walked back toward the door, before leaving. He placed a metal tray on the floor, 2 pieces of bread and a half-empty bottle of water. "Eat," he said. "You'll need your strength for tomorrow." Then the door closed, and the sound of a heavy lock echoed through the basement again. For a few moments, neither of them moved. Then Ethan crawled to Ray, shaking her shoulder gently. "Ray, are you okay?" He whispered. She groaned, opening her eyes slowly. "He likes games," she said weakly, "but every game can be broken." Ethan looked at the nail still hidden in his hand. His mind racing, he had 2 choices: trust her plan or take his own path. The footsteps above had faded, and the silence returned. Ray pushed herself up, pain in her eyes, but determination in her voice. "Help me lift the boards," she whispered. "We can escape before he comes back." Ethan hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. Together they crawled to the corner of the room. The wood was old, but nailed tight, the boards splintered and covered in dust. Ray used her chains to pull while Ethan dug his fingers underneath. It was slow, painful work, but after several minutes, one of the boards began to move. A faint draft came from below, cold, stale air. "There," Ray said, her voice trembling. "That's the tunnel." Ethan pried the last board loose, revealing a narrow metal hatch. It was dark below, and the smell of chemicals burned his nose. Still, freedom, or something that looked like it, was better than this cage. Ray smiled faintly. "We can make it," she said, "if we're quiet." But just as they began to open the hatch, the speaker crackled to life again. "Subjects 07 and 12. The distorted voice said, "Unauthorized movement detected." A loud alarm began to ring. Red lights flashing across the basement, Ethan's heart raced. They know. Go. Ray shouted, pulling the hatch open. Ethan grabbed her arm and climbed down first, his feet landing on a cold metal ladder. Ray followed, pulling the hatch shut behind them. The sound of boots above echoed as someone re-entered the basement. But now they were gone, hidden in the tunnels below. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and filled with pipes that hissed and leaked. The air was thick, every breath heavy. Ethan led the way, holding onto the wall to guide himself. Behind him, Ray whispered, "This tunnel connects to the old part of the facility." "You said you didn't know where we were," Ethan said. Ray was silent for a long time. Then whispered, "I lied." Ethan stopped. Turning to look at her, "Why?" he demanded quietly. "Because I didn't know if I could trust you," she replied. "You were brought here later, and you volunteered?" "Volunteered," Ethan said, confused. "That's not possible." "I would never," but his words died when a memory flashed in his mind. A white hallway, a clipboard, his own signature on a form. A man shaking his hand and saying, "Welcome to the experiment." His heart pounded. Was it real? Or something they made him believe? Ray touched his shoulder. "Keep moving," she said softly. "If we stop, we die down here." They continued down the tunnel until it split in two directions. One path had faint light glowing at the end. The other carried a strange sound, distant screams. Muffled and echoing, Ray looked at both tunnels, her face pale. "The light might mean an exit," she said, "but those screams," Ethan interrupted, "might be someone still alive." They stood there, listening, the screams coming and going. Ethan's breathing grew shallow, his mind torn. Ray looked at him. "We can't save everyone," she said. "We save ourselves." Her words hit him like ice. He looked at her again. Was she really someone to trust? Or was she leading him deeper into a trap? The tunnel lights flickered, and the air grew colder, somewhere far behind them. Another alarm started, faint but rising. "They're coming," Ray whispered. "We have to choose." Now, Ethan's eyes moved between the two paths, one full of light and hope, the other filled with pain and mystery. His hand trembled as he reached out, his voice breaking. "If I follow the light, we might escape," he said. "If I follow the screams, maybe we find the truth." Ray's face was unreadable, her expression calm, but her eyes full of fear. "Whatever you do," she whispered, "don't look back. Choice A, follow the light and try to reach the surface. Choice B, follow the screams deeper into the tunnels." The sound of footsteps echoed again. Closer now, Ethan took one last look at Ray. Then, at the two tunnels, he took a deep breath and stepped forward into the darkness. The tunnel stretched endlessly, cold air crawling over Ethan's skin. Every sound, every drip of water, every echo of their footsteps felt too loud. Ray walked behind him, breathing hard, her eyes darting to every shadow. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence itself was heavy. Like the tunnel wanted to swallow their voices. They came to a junction. Ethan hesitated, staring at the two directions, one sloping upward, the other curving down into deeper darkness. He turned to Ray. "You said this place connects to something. What did you mean?" Ray's expression tightened. "There's a lab," she whispered. "It's where he kept us. Where it all started." Her voice trembled. But not from fear, from guilt. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest. "Why do I feel like I've been here before?" he asked quietly. Ray didn't answer. Instead, she looked down the darker tunnel, her voice breaking. "Because you have." They moved deeper. their shadows stretching long and thin against the wet walls. The air grew colder, filled with the smell of metal and old chemicals. A red light blinked in the distance, slow, steady, like a heartbeat, when they reached it. They found a metal door half open. Beyond it, a large underground chamber glowed faintly under flickering white lights. The room was filled with shattered glass tubes, broken equipment, and overturned tables. Some of the glass tanks still held liquid, thick and green, with dark shapes floating inside. Ethan stared, unable to look away. "What is this place?" he whispered. Ray's hands shook as she touched one of the tanks. "It's where we were made," she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan frowned. "Made." Ray turned toward him, her face pale and cold. "They called it Project Loop." She said, "Human trials, memory reconstruction, control experiments." Ethan's head spun. "You mean we were test subjects?" Ray gave a bitter smile. "You were," she said. "I wasn't supposed to be here at all," before Ethan could ask. A noise crackled from a speaker on the far wall. The same distorted male voice from the basement filled the room. "Welcome back, Subject 7, it said. "You've made it farther than most." Ethan looked up, his jaw tightening. "Who are you?" He shouted. The voice chuckled softly. "You already know." A monitor flickered to life on the wall, showing grainy footage, a man in a white lab coat. Standing beside a table, Ethan leaned closer, his heart pounding. The man turned toward the camera. It was him, Ethan himself, smiling. Shaking hands with the masked figure, the voice spoke again. "You volunteered for this, remember? You said you wanted to forget." Ethan stumbled backward. Disbelief written across his face. "That's not true," he whispered. "That can't be me." Ray watched silently, her expression unreadable. The monitor switched to another clip, Ray standing beside Ethan. Handing him a syringe, his own voice played through the speaker. "We start the test at midnight." Ethan's breath quickened. "Ray, what is this?" She looked away, tears filling her eyes. "You were part of the team, Ethan," she said. "You helped design this experiment?" He shook his head violently. "No," he said, "that's impossible." "I don't even remember, that's the point," Ray interrupted. "You wanted your memory erased to feel what the subjects felt. To understand fear." The words hit him harder than any pain he'd ever felt. He stared at her, realizing there was something in her eyes to regret. Sorrow and something else. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Because if you remembered too soon, the loop would reset," she said, "and you'd wake up in the basement again." Ethan's mind was spinning, every thought crashing into another. He turned back to the monitors. Most of them were cracked. But one screen still worked. It showed a live feed from another room. Rows of empty cells lined the walls. But in one, there was movement, a figure chained, shaking. Whispering something again and again, Ethan leaned closer, trying to see. Then his stomach dropped. The person on the screen was him. Same face, same clothes, same bruise on the wrist. He watched the version of himself struggling in a cell identical to the one he had escaped. Ray whispered behind him, "That's the loop." The speakers crackled again. The voice laughed softly. "Every choice you make leads you back to me." Ethan grabbed a nearby chair and threw it at the screen. Shattering it, the sound cut off, leaving only the echo of breaking glass. He turned to Ray, his eyes blazing. "You knew about this the whole time?" Ray nodded slowly. "I wanted to end it, but I needed you awake. I needed you angry." "Why?" he asked. "Because you're the only one who can shut it down." Ethan stared at the broken monitors, his chest heaving. In the corner of the lab was a computer terminal still working, its screen glowing faintly. On it flashed a message. "System control, a CCSS, press enter to reset." Ray walked closer, her voice shaking. "If you press that?" It ends everything. The loops, the tests, me. All of it? Ethan looked at her sharply. What do you mean, you two? Ray smiled weakly. I'm not real, Ethan. I was created as part of your trial. Her words hung heavy in the air. He didn't know what to believe anymore. The sound of sirens began in the distance, a rising alarm, the facility waking up again. Ethan moved toward the terminal, his hand trembling. Ray reached out, grabbing his arm. Listen to me, she said urgently, if you press it. You'll lose your memories forever, but you'll save everyone else who's trapped in the loop on the other side of the room. Another door hissed open, revealing a stairway leading upward. A faint wind blew from above, carrying the smell of the outside world. Ethan looked between the glowing terminal and the open door. Freedom or truth, erase it all or face it? Ray's voice broke the silence. You have to choose, Ethan. Before it's too late, choice A, press enter and end the loop, destroying the lab and your memories. Choice B, escape through the stairway and uncover what's really outside. The siren grew louder, the lights flickered. Ethan's hand hovered in the air. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made his choice. The alarm screamed through the underground facility, red lights flashing across the broken lab. Ethan's hands shook as he stared at the glowing screen. The word enter blinking in white against the black background. Behind him, the stairway door stood open, a faint light shining down from above. He had only seconds to choose: stay and destroy everything, or escape and find the truth. He took one step forward, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. The sound of the sirens felt distant now, almost like they belonged to another world. Ray's voice cut through the noise. Ethan, please, she said softly. Don't let them use you again. He looked at her, the girl who claimed to be unreal, the one who'd lied and helped, and maybe saved him. Why should I believe you? He asked, his voice trembling because, she whispered, you designed me to tell the truth. Her words hit like a knife. Ethan stared at her, his mind spinning. He wanted to ask what that meant, but deep down, he already knew. He'd seen enough in the lab, the footage, the notes, his own handwriting on the walls. This was his creation, his guilt. He looked one last time at the terminal, then pressed enter. A low hum filled the room, followed by the sound of hundreds of machines powering down. The red lights faded to blue, then to nothing. Ray took a step back, her body flickering faintly, like a glitch in a broken screen. What's happening? Ethan asked, panic rising. She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. You're ending the loop, she said. And I'm part of it. Her image began to fade. Static forming around her outline. Ethan reached out, his voice breaking. Ray, wait. She shook her head. You did it, Ethan. Remember who you are. Then her voice grew faint, her body dissolving into the cold air, and the room went dark. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, light began to return, but this time it wasn't the harsh white of the lab. It was sunlight. Ethan blinked, squinting as warmth touched his face for the first time in what felt like forever. He stood in a forest, tall trees surrounding him, the wind whispering softly through the leaves. He looked down at his hands, clean, free, no chains, no wounds. He took one deep breath and felt peace, but the peace didn't last long. In the distance, he saw something strange. A small cabin stood between the trees, its door open. Smoke rising from the chimney, it looked familiar. He walked toward it slowly, the leaves crunching under his feet inside the cabin. Everything was neat, a bed, a table, and a wall covered with photographs. He stepped closer, his stomach twisting. Every photo showed him Ethan standing beside Ray. Smiling, working, laughing. There were notes pinned beside each picture. Written in his handwriting, Test 01 Emotional Stability. Test 05 Subject Bond Response. Test 12. The loop reset. His heart pounded. He looked down and saw a folder on the table labeled Memory Code. He opened it slowly. Inside were documents describing the experiment. The words were simple but horrifying. Objective: to test human morality through artificial loops of fear and trust. Subject 7. Ethan Coren, lead scientist. Voluntarily erased his own memory for full immersion. Artificial entity rate wealth program designed to adapt and challenge moral perception. Ethan's hands began to shake. His name was Coren. Dr. Ethan Coren, the same name Ray had mentioned in the basement. He stumbled backward, his breath shallow. He wasn't the victim. He was the creator. The sunlight flickered, the air rippling like water. A voice spoke softly behind him. "You shouldn't have come back." Ethan turned. His eyes widening. A man stood in the doorway. Tall. Calm, wearing a white lab coat. His face was older, tired, but familiar. He looked exactly like Ethan, only older. The older man smiled slightly. "Hello, me." Ethan backed away. Shaking his head. "No," he whispered. "This isn't real. It's as real as you made it," the older version said. Stepping closer, "You designed the loop to test yourself to erase guilt. To see if redemption was possible." Ethan's voice cracked. "I wanted to stop it." The older one laughed quietly. "Then why are you still here?" The forest began to shimmer, the cabin walls bending, the photos falling from the wall. Ethan's knees weakened. "None of this is real, is it?" he whispered. The older version tilted his head. "It's real enough to hurt. That's what you wanted." The sound of static filled the air again. From the doorway, a soft glow appeared, a blue holographic shimmer. Ray's image formed once more, faint and transparent. "You both created me," she said, her voice calm but sad. "But you forgot one thing. Loops don't end when the creator refuses to stop watching." The older Ethan frowned. "You shouldn't exist anymore." Ray smiled faintly. "You shouldn't either." Her form brightened, the light expanding until it filled the cabin. Ethan covered his face as everything turned white. When he opened his eyes again, he was back in the lab. Only this time, everything was burning. Flames crawled along the walls. The machines melting, alarms screaming. Ray stood beside him again, this time solid, real, holding a data drive. "This is it," she said. "The proof, the end." Everything. She handed him the drive. "If you upload this, the truth goes public. But there's no escape. The fire will reach us before we're out." Her eyes locked with his. Full of fear and trust, Ethan looked around. The stairway door was still open, but smoke poured through it. He felt heat on his skin, the air thick and choking. The drive in his hand was cold, small, and heavy, the weight of everything he had done. He stared at Ray. "Will you make it out?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "I was never meant to." The ceiling began to crack. Debris falling. Ethan had only moments. Ray's voice trembled. "Choose Ethan," she said. "Save the truth. Or save yourself. Choice A. Upload the data and destroy the loop forever. Dying in the fire. Choice B. Escape through the stairway and keep the secret buried." Living with the guilt, the flames roared louder. Ethan took one last look at Ray, then at the screen, waiting for his decision. His hands shook, his eyes full of tears, and he made his choice. The fire roared through the laboratory, smoke twisting like dark clouds against the ceiling. Ethan's breath came in short. Painful gasps as the heat pressed against his skin. The data drive in his hand felt like it was burning too, as if it knew what was inside. The truth. Ray stood beside him, her face glowing red in the firelight. Her expression calm but filled with urgency. "Decide, Ethan," she said softly. Before everything collapses, he looked at the terminal, cracked, sparking, its blue light pulsing like a dying heartbeat. One press, one upload, and the world would know what happened down here. But if he stayed, he would die with it. His chest tightened as he thought about all the faces on the walls. All the people who had suffered because of the loop. Maybe it was time for the truth to burn with him. Or maybe the world deserved to see what he had done. The floor trembled beneath his feet. The sound of metal twisting and breaking echoing through the room. Ethan made his choice if he uploaded the data. Ethan shoved the drive into the port and hit upload. The terminal screen flashed white. Lines of code running faster than his eyes could follow. Ray stepped back, watching silently, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "All data transferring," the computer voice said calmly. Above them, explosions rattled the walls, dust falling like ash. Ray looked up, smiling faintly. "You did it." Ethan turned to her, his eyes watering from smoke. "Can we make it out?" She shook her head. "No, not this time." The fire spread faster now, wrapping the machines in orange light. Ray's form began to flicker again, parts of her body fading in and out. "You'll see the sky again," she whispered. "Just not this one." He reached for her, but his hand passed through her shoulder. Her image faded completely, leaving only the fire and the sound of the upload reaching 100%. A sudden silence fell. The sirens stopped, the alarms died. And for the first time since he woke up, there was peace. Ethan smiled weakly, sinking to his knees, the heat swallowing everything. As the fire consumed the last of the lab, the screen showed one final message: truth delivered. Outside, somewhere far above, a satellite blinked to life, sending a signal across the world. The loop was broken. But Ethan's story was over, if he escaped. Ethan turned away from the terminal, clutching the data drive tightly. The air was too hot, too heavy. His lungs screaming for air, he stumbled toward the stairway. The sound of falling steel behind him. "Ethan!" Ray shouted, her voice shaking. "If you go, it never ends." He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, his hand gripping the railing. "I can't die here," he said. "Not like this." Ray stepped closer, her face full of sorrow. "Then you'll live, knowing everything starts again." He looked back once, seeing her standing there, surrounded by fire. Calm, almost peaceful. Then he turned and ran. Up the stairs, through the smoke, through the heat, until his body screamed for him to stop. He burst through a heavy door at the top and collapsed into blinding sunlight. For a long time, he just lay there on the dirt, gasping for air. When he finally looked up, he saw endless fields stretching in every direction. The sky was clear, blue, and perfect. But behind him, the ground shook and the lab exploded. A massive cloud of smoke rising into the sky. He shielded his eyes, watching as everything he'd built burned away. He pulled the data drive from his pocket, blackened but intact. In his mind, he heard Ray's voice again, faint, echoing like a ghost. "If you run from the truth, it follows you." He stood slowly, staring at the smoke somewhere inside him. Guilt twisted tighter than ever. He walked until he found an old road, a half-broken sign by the side. It read, "Property of Corin Research Division." Ethan's stomach turned. The name was his. He dropped the drive onto the ground. He had escaped, but freedom felt like a lie. Two paths, one destiny. No matter which choice Ethan made, the loop didn't end. Because loops were not just wires and code, they were memories, regrets, and decisions that never stopped echoing. The fire of the lab became the birth of another one somewhere else. A new subject, a new test, the same cycle, and in that unseen place. A voice returned, cold, calm, familiar. "Good morning." "Subject 7, it said. "Are you ready to begin again?" Ethan opened his eyes, his heart pounding. He was back in the basement, the same flickering light swinging above him, the same dripping pipe, the same smell of rust. Across the room sat Ray, watching him quietly. Only this time, she smiled differently, softer, sadder, almost knowing. "Welcome back," she said. Ethan stared at her, confusion flooding his face. "No," he whispered. "Not again." Ray tilted her head slightly. "You still don't understand, do you?" She said, "The loop isn't a prison. It's a mirror." He looked around the basement, the chains, the walls, the tray of food by the door. Everything exactly as before, but something felt off. He reached for the chain on his wrist. It was unlocked. Loose. He stood up, trembling. Ray didn't move. "Why am I back here?" He demanded, to make the right choice. She said softly. This time, the speaker above them crackled to life again. That same cold voice filled the air. "One of you doesn't belong here," it said. Ethan turned toward the ceiling, anger burning in his eyes. "No," he whispered. "Not this time." He grabbed the metal tray, threw it against the wall, and shouted, "Who's watching us?" The lights flickered. The sound of footsteps echoed from above. Ray stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "Be careful," she said. "The truth breaks more than lies." Choice A. Confront Ray and demand answers about the loop. Choice B. Wait for the figure to come downstairs and face whoever's behind the voice. The footsteps grew louder. The door began to open again. And the loop started all over. The door creaked open slowly. Cold air rushed into the basement, carrying with it the smell of smoke and metal. Ethan's heart pounded as he turned toward the sound. Behind him, Ray stood still, her eyes fixed on the doorway. The faint red light flickered across her face. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The only sound was the hum of the dying light. A shadow appeared at the top of the stairs. A figure stepped down tall, wearing a black coat and a mask with a single glowing red lens. The voice from the speaker now came directly from him, cold and calm. "Good evening, Subject 7, it said. "You've made progress." Ethan clenched his fists, anger surging inside him. "I'm done with your experiments," he said, his voice shaking. The figure tilted his head slightly. "You say that every time." Ray took a small step forward, her voice trembling. "Stop," she whispered. "Please." "No more." The figure ignored her. He looked directly at Ethan. "You chose to survive," he said. "You chose to remember." Ethan's breath caught. He remembered now, the files, the lab, the fire. This man wasn't just another part of the experiment. He was the one running it. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small black device. He pressed a button, and the walls of the basement shimmered. The concrete began to fade, replaced by glass and metal. In seconds, the basement was gone. Ethan stood inside a circular white chamber filled with light. He looked around in disbelief. "What is this?" he whispered. Ray stood beside him, her hands shaking. "This is the real basement," she said softly. "The one you never escaped." The figure walked closer, his voice calm. "You've been here for 172 loops," he said. "Each time, you get closer to remembering why." Ethan stepped back, his chest tightening. "I don't want your games anymore," he said. The man paused, then pressed another button. The walls turned transparent. Outside, Ethan saw rows of capsules, hundreds of them, each one holding a person. Asleep, connected to machines, his breath froze. Every capsule looked the same, and in the capsule across from him, he saw himself lying perfectly still, wires running from his head to the ceiling. He staggered backward. "That's not possible," he whispered. Ray's eyes filled with tears. "It's the price of freedom," she said. "You gave up your real life to test if you could break your own design." The masked man nodded. "You built the loop to find redemption," he said. "But every time you find it, you erase it and begin again." Ethan felt dizzy. The world spinning, he pressed his hands against the glass wall. Staring at his sleeping body, "Why can't I wake up?" he asked. Ray stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Because you won't forgive yourself," the masked man's voice echoed through the chamber. "There's one last decision, Subject 7, he said. "End the simulation and wake up, or stay here and destroy the system from the inside." Ethan turned toward Ray, confusion and fear mixing in his eyes. "What happens to you if I wake up?" She smiled weakly. "I disappear," she said. "I only exist here in your guilt." He looked back at his reflection in the capsule, his heart breaking outside the chamber. Alarms began to sound again. The loop was collapsing. Time was running out. "Choose," the masked man said. "Wake up or stay if he wakes up." Ethan reached for the console beside him. His hands trembled as he entered the command. Ray's image flickered. "You'll forget me," she whispered. He looked at her one last time. "Maybe that's how I forgive myself," he said. He pressed execute, the chamber filled with blinding light. Ray smiled faintly, then vanished, her final words echoing in his mind. "You were never trapped, Ethan, just lost." The light faded. Ethan opened his eyes to a different world. He was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines. A nurse rushed in, her voice full of shock. "He's awake," she said. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. A doctor leaned over him. "You've been in a coma for 6 years," he said gently. "Do you remember anything?" Ethan stared at the ceiling, silent for the first time. He didn't know what was real outside the window. The morning sun rose slowly, and somewhere far away, a faint voice whispered from a speaker. "Loop status, active if he stays." Ethan looked at the console, then at Ray. He shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "If I leave, it starts again somewhere else." Ray's eyes widened. "You'll be trapped forever," she said. He nodded. "Maybe that's what I deserve." He grabbed the black device from the masked man's hand and smashed it against the floor. Sparks exploded, alarms blared. The walls began to crack. Ray shouted over the noise. "What are you doing?" "Ending it from inside," he said. The masked man stepped back, his voice calm even in chaos. "You can't destroy the loop," he said. Ethan turned toward him. "Then I'll bury it with me." He ran to the main console and began typing furiously. The chamber lights flickered red. Ray reached for him, but he shook his head. "Go," he said. "You don't have to die with me." Her voice broke. "I was never alive without you." The walls shattered, energy exploding in waves of light. Ray's form disintegrated into shards of blue. Ethan smiled faintly, tears in his eyes for the first time. The loop didn't restart. The sound faded, the light dimmed, and everything went silent. Then, from the dark, a faint heartbeat began. 1, 2, 3. The screen showed a message. "System error. Subject missing." Somewhere in the emptiness, a door opened, light spilled through, and a new voice whispered, "Welcome to Loop 2, Choice A. Follow the light and begin the unknown new world. Choice B. Turn away and remain in the silence, breaking the cycle forever." The light grew brighter, the heart beat louder. And Ethan took his first step toward the end, or the beginning. The white light pulsed like a heartbeat. Ethan stood at the edge of it, his body trembling, unsure if it was real or another illusion. The silence around him was heavy, endless. Behind him stretched the shattered remains of the chamber-broken glass, torn wires, and the faint echo of Ray's voice fading into nothing. Before him, the light glowed brighter, inviting. He closed his eyes and stepped forward. The air changed instantly. It was colder, cleaner, and smelled faintly of rain when he opened his eyes. He was standing in a city street. Cars passed, people talked. Laughter filled the air. Everything looked normal, too normal. He took a few slow steps, feeling the ground under his feet. No alarms, no wires, no voice from above. For the first time, it felt like freedom, but deep inside. Something was wrong. He looked up at a billboard. It showed a commercial, bright colors, smiling faces. Then his heart stopped. On the screen, he saw her Ray, smiling, alive. Advertising a new technology called Loop Life, Experience the Future. Ethan froze, his breath catching. Her voice echoed from the speakers. Reality is just a choice. He stumbled backward, shaking his head. No, he whispered. It's not possible. He turned toward a shop window and caught his reflection. For a moment, his own face flickered, replaced by static. Then the reflection smiled, even though he didn't. He stepped back in fear, his pulse racing. People around him didn't seem to notice. They kept walking, their faces blank, eyes slightly glazed. It was then he realized the horrible truth. The loop hadn't ended. It had evolved. He began to run. Pushing through the crowd, every screen he passed showed Ray's face. Every voice whispered his name. Ethan, Subject 7, welcome back. He covered his ears. Trying to shut it out, the city felt alive, breathing. Watching him, finally. He turned into a narrow alley and collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. His hands trembled as he looked around. The walls were covered with glowing patterns, circuits running like veins through the bricks. He wasn't outside the system. He was inside a bigger one. A shadow moved at the end of the alley. Ethan stood up slowly from the darkness. A figure stepped forward, a young woman wearing a gray hoodie, her face hidden. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice weak. The girl didn't answer at first. Then she pulled down her hood. Ethan's eyes widened. It was Ray, but not the Ray he knew. This version looked more human, tired, and real. "You found me," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "I watched you die," he said. She smiled faintly. "You watched a version of me die?" He frowned. Confused, she pointed to the glowing walls. "The loop wasn't destroyed," she said. "It changed form. It connects everyone now." Ethan stepped closer. "Why would you do that?" She looked at him sadly. "Because you programmed it too." "Ethan, to give people the choice you never made." Her words hit hard. He staggered back, his mind racing. "I didn't want this," he said. She nodded slowly. "You wanted control." "Not peace." He clenched his fists. "How do I end it?" he asked. Ray's eyes softened. "You can't," she said. "But you can free others." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal cube, its surface glowing with faint blue lines. "This is a key," she said. "The original command module, if you use it. You can shut down the global loop, but it will erase every connected mind, including mine." Ethan stared at it, his heart pounding. "And if I don't?" "Then humanity stays inside the illusion forever," she said. Happy, but not real, thunder rolled across the sky. The buildings around them flickered like holograms. Time was running out again. Ethan took the cube in his hands, its warmth spreading through his skin. He could feel the pulse of every connected person, millions of them, living inside the perfect lie he created. Ray stepped back, watching him carefully. "Whatever you choose," she said softly, "do it for the right reason this time, if he destroys the loop." Ethan closed his eyes and pressed the cube's center. A bright blue light exploded outward. The ground shook, the air hummed. And the city began to dissolve like dust in sunlight. People froze mid-step. Smiling as they vanished, Ray looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "You finally did it," she whispered. He reached out, trying to hold her, but his hand passed through her again. Her voice echoed in the fading world. "You freed them, Ethan. Now free yourself." Then she was gone. Everything was gone. Ethan stood alone in pure white silence. He looked up, and for the first time, there was no voice, no machine, no loop, only peace. If he keeps the loop, Ethan looked at the cube, then lowered it slowly. Ray's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't," she said. He nodded. "They deserve peace. Even if it's fake." Her face filled with sorrow. "You're still trapped in your own illusion," she whispered. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's what it means to be human. He turned, walking toward the light at the end of the alley. The city shimmered back into clarity. Bright and alive again, people laughed, screens glowed, and Ray's voice played softly on every corner. "Welcome to Loop Life, where every choice is happiness." Ethan disappeared into the crowd. A ghost among the living, a creator inside his own creation. But somewhere deep inside the system, a flicker of blue light appeared. Ray's voice. "Distant but alive," whispered Loop 3, initializing. The screen turned black. A single line of text appeared, glowing red. "Choice Loop active." The faint sound of Ethan's heartbeat echoed one last time. 1, 2, 3. Then silence, and the loop began again.